Now, we all realize that New Jersey has a very diverse and varied landscape. And because of this diverse landscape, it has created for us a history rich in folklore. We have everything from pirates and robbers to assorted ghosts. We even have a train crash, and we even have our own personal devil. So just sit back and relax, because as my website suggests, begin with a story. That's exactly what I'm going to do. In 1880, down in Tuckerton, New Jersey, that's southern New Jersey, there was this villager who was heading home after a night on the town or a night in the tavern. He had had a few drinks. And as he was walking home, he spotted a sailing ship. Now, a sailing ship isn't unusual down by the coast, but it is unusual because the way he saw this sailing ship, he wondered whether his imagination was playing tricks on him, whether perhaps he had had a drink too many. For this sailing ship was sailing across the land through the fields. He did a double take and he said, "No, I'm not going to say anything to anyone." Well, time passed and more people began to see this ghost ship in the twilight hours before dawn. And most people who hadn't seen it started saying, well, they're the ramblings of somebody who's had one drink too many. Or perhaps, their eyesight, that early morning played tricks on them. But eventually, enough people saw, and the rumors got big enough that when somebody who was a teetotaler, which means they never drank, and was known to have excellent vision, said they spotted it, and that there certainly was, well, then at that moment, the legend of the phantom sailing ship began. The reason I brought up myth, even though we're not having any myths tonight, is because it often gets confused with legend. The difference of a myth to a legend is a myth is a traditional story about the early history of a people that explains natural phenomena and with some supernatural elements. So way back when, the Greeks had some wonderful myths, and one of their best myths was they had all these gods. And the great thing about that was for the people who didn't understand like we do today, when thunder came, well, that was Zeus, and he was talking to people and he was angry. And then when lightning came, that was him showing his anger. And it explained to people who didn't understand lightning and thunder in the scientific terms we do today in a way that they could understand. During the American Revolution, New Jersey was actually a pretty lawless place for those early colonists. And because of that, a lot of bandits and gangs grew up in New Jersey and took advantage and robbed and pillaged. One of the most famous pine robbers actually was a bit of a character. You see, his name was Joe Mulligar. Now, Joe Mulligar, he enjoyed dancing. So he was sometimes called the dancing robber. You see, he would go to barn dances and dance all night with those people, merrymaking, have a great time. And then when they were leaving, he'd rob them. Not a very good guess, if you ask me. But when he actually saw that they didn't have money, he'd check them out and see that they only had a few coppers. He actually was known to give money to those poor people, as well as give money to the poor boxes of the church. So another title he had was Robin Hood of the Pine Barrens. The reason I have ghosts and stills together, because if you go back to the 18th century and the early 19th century, you will discover that the Pine Barrens was very well known for moonshine, and that 1 in 1,000 people had a still. So, and one of the most popular products of this moonshine was called Jersey Lightning, and it was supposed to be very, very strong liquor. We're now on to what you all are waiting for, I think. You're waiting for the stories of the the Jersey Devil. But Jersey actually has more than just one devil. Satan himself approached him and said, I hear you think you're better than I am at fiddling. And Sammy said, yes, by the way, I do think I'm better than you. So as the Pine Barren villagers say, they, the very next day, had a contest. And the devil began to play the first song, and it was beautiful, and it was difficult. But Sammy didn't pause a beat. He started playing his song, and it was a little more difficult. And then the devil began to play, and then Sammy, and each time the difficulty grew and grew, and it was wonderful to hear all this beautiful music. Until finally Sammy played. He played something he had created. Something very touching, something very mystical, something that hit the soul. And it said at that moment, the devil stopped and said, you're right, you are a better fiddler than me. And he won the contest. Now, Sammy lived for many years, and he was very proud of the fact that he had beat the devil at playing the fiddle. So when he died, his fiddle got put in a really beautiful box so that it wouldn't be tarnished at all. And it said that every so often, if you happen to be near that box at a certain hour, you will hear the fiddle playing that very song. I'm hoping that you enjoy this tale of how I think the Jersey Devil was born. Now, this is where my story really begins. And I tell you, it's the truth. But some of you are not going to believe it. But if it's a lie, well, it's a good lie. But it's my story. I'm going to tell it. Early in my pregnancy, I had a very upsetting time because my husband, Daniel, came home drunk as a skunk. And you see, he came home having spent the money we needed. And that meant my children were going to go hungry for some days because of his need to drink. So I was angry with him. And I spoke my mind in anger. And I said to him, you don't care about your children. So I cursed this child within that it becomes a devil. Now, no sooner were those words spoken than I felt a chill run down my very back. And I regretted having said those words. But I had said those words. I prayed every day before I was going to deliver that child within me to God to forgive me for my hasty, angry words. But you know, a word spoken can't be unspoken. I hope you guys have enjoyed my performance this evening and learned a little bit more about New Jersey. And I hope you are inspired to go out and find a few more stories of your own.